President Zelensky here on set. After meeting with President Trump at the UN, the two leaders had their bilat behind closed doors, and then they opened it up for questions. But at the same time, their wives, the first ladies of the U.S. and of Ukraine, met in their own bilateral meeting. And this was in response to First Lady Melania Trump's letter to Vladimir Putin about saving children. After that, the First Lady of Ukraine wrote the First Lady of the U.S. a letter thanking her and talking about children of Ukraine. Let's bring in our panel. Fox and Friends co-host Brian Kilmeade, Harold Ford Jr., former Tennessee congressman, co-host of The Five, and Dana Perino, co-anchor of America's Newsroom, co-host of The Five as well. Brian, your thoughts? You got to see him right there at the end of the segment.
Actually, I watched the whole thing. I was right over there when you're doing the interview, and I felt like after and before and through his voice, there was a bounce in his step. I feel as though he didn't come over here like a leader in the middle of a war zone. I feel like he came over as an experienced leader, knowing exactly what a pledge is and what support is. And I think his meeting with the president went extremely well, but it was a well in relation to everything that he needed. I think that he realizes he sees a president that gave Vladimir Putin an opening, put his personal stake and reputation on the line, and Vladimir Putin did the impossible. He made it so abundantly clear he has no interest in peace. He will fight to take all of Ukraine. So he wiped out the gray area. He makes it easy for Trump to say there's nothing to latch on to. I'm all in for you. It reminded me of Rocky II, only this is serious stuff, when Adrian was in a coma, and then she opened up her eyes, Stallone leaned in, and she said, win. When he put out that Truth Social, he basically says, you can win. And that's why I think that Zelensky was just thrilled when you had that exchange today.
You know, as the president posted on that Truth Social, he also talked about today how Russia's economy is really hurting. And it suggested to me that he sees a crack in the so-called armor of Putin.
I thought the interview was excellent, both your questions and his answers. And it reminded me of what they say about the Colorado weather. If you don't like it, stick around because it'll change pretty quickly. Just last February, we had the disastrous meeting between Trump and Zelensky.
That interview was a little different.
That was a little different. Then they meet at the Vatican. Then President Trump has a big summit in Alaska. And to me, the worst thing you can do to a president of the United States is to waste his time.
Yep.
And that's what happened when it became, as Brian says, it became very clear that Putin has no desire to do that. I think Zelensky was solid. President Trump is like the head coach of NATO. He's like, you can do this. And that gives him some confidence, gives him a little bit of a boost, steel in his spine. But the one thing I think is clear is that there is a lack of conviction and leadership and action by the European leaders. And if you think about where this conflict is going, and you talked about it, incursions from Russia into Estonia and Denmark and Poland, then that's what Zelensky was trying to say in the Oval Office in February. Now he's been proven right, so he has a chance. But the trains are moving at different speeds, and he's going to need all the help he can get from President Trump.
The message was clear in the speech today, too, President Trump's speech about the European nations and leaders needing to get off Russian oil. As they're fighting, helping Ukraine fight Russia, they are still purchasing a lot of Russian oil. Harold.
No doubt. Thanks for having me. I think a couple of things. The president, the relationship between Zelensky and the president has grown. It was interesting when you asked him how and why do you think this relationship has changed. He goes, you know, it's time. We've had an opportunity to get to know one another. I think Brian's points are exactly right, that President Trump, I now firmly believes, like Dana said, thinks that and knows that Putin's tagging him along. He said that a while ago. I thought the most interesting thing after what President Trump's social media, what do you call the Trump social thing, but Truth Social, when he said, look, they should be able to take all of their land, was the question he answered when the first question between he and Zelensky from the press, which was, if Russia goes into the airspace of a NATO country, what should you do? He says you should shoot them down. Two important, powerful, and contradictory messages from this president. You think about August 15th, where he was with Putin there in Alaska and where he is today. I think those who believe that the president should have been in this position months ago should just accept him being here, welcome him here. Let's figure out how we not only win the effort in Ukraine, but how we begin to even get actionable on that plan for rare earth minerals and all the other things and bring Ukraine even more so into the normal world order.
You know, the president was pretty critical of the UN General Assembly today. It started out, the escalator didn't work for him, then the teleprompter was down, then there was problems with the sound inside the hall, but he made, you know, jokes of everything and moved forward. But here's a message where he is essentially critical of the UN and how it operates.
In a period of just 7 months, I have ended 7 unendable wars. It's too bad that I had to do these things instead of the United Nations doing them. What is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential, but it's not even coming close to living up to that potential.
He said immigration and energy, really big issues.
Remember, it would be the third rail to bring up anything except climate change. You better accept it or else something terrible is going to happen to you. Your career's over. And now he said the green scam, the windmills don't work. Start drilling in the North Sea. Get control of your borders. Your whole country's going to go to hell. I know how to do it. You can ask me. I'm available for counseling. I also thought it was interesting, too, is that at the UN, they're about to get Ambassador Michael Waltz. Waltz is a presence.
He's there
got
now.
International respect.
Yeah.
He's going to be somebody that's going to be on the interview stage. He is going to help the United Nations raise his profile. I liked your point on the 5. Say, Mr. President, you don't like the UN, let's fix it. Put up a 10-point plan. I want to see this fixed. I want to see some changes. Why does he have to fix things in New York City? By the way, we got a huge bill to pay, but we have not fulfilled the invoices arrive. We're not going to pay it. So the president can simply say, I'm not paying that bill until we put those changes. He loves leverage.
We usually don't talk about what happens on the 5 here.
I apologize. Is that
okay.
a rivalry?
I mean, it's okay.
It seems so friendly.
Brett, it was that good. He had to say that.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.